Sure. Well, the role of parliamentarians, I guess, anywhere is critical, particularly where you have democracy. Unless parliamentarians are making their voices heard, then the democracy is really not, in a sense, working for the people who have elected those members of parliament there. Now, I think that in a Caribbean context, parliamentarians are particularly important to ensure that governments, first of all, set targets for the use of renewable energy, and secondly, that those targets are actually going to be met by the date that they have been set to be met. How are you going to do that? It means that parliamentarians have a unique opportunity and a unique responsibility through the medium of the parliament to ask the government questions on an annual basis. How are they making progress towards these particular targets that they have set themselves for? So, for example, we know that some countries have set renewable energy targets by 2030, be it 10 or 15%. What role does a parliamentarian have now to ensure that that target will be met by 2030? It means that on an annual basis, they need to be asking the government questions in the Chamber of Parliaments. But even beyond that, they need to perhaps set up oversight committees that ensure that the government is actually committed to meeting these targets. Now, it's not only important to think about it in terms of meeting particular renewable energy targets for the sake of it. Because we live in the Caribbean and most of these countries are small island developing states, it's an imperative to survival that we ensure that, yes, our own countries are meeting these targets, but also much larger countries, the developed countries, are also committed to meeting those targets, because we don't want a situation whereby we have climate change and we have global warming above the 2 degrees Celsius that we know that if it goes beyond that, we're into dangerous territory, and perhaps we could have the melting of ice caps and so sea level rise, which ultimately can have a devastating impact on our geography here for small island states. So there's a huge amount of responsibility that rests on the shoulders of parliamentarians, and they must understand this. And I think really this workshop for parliamentarians here, I hope really is now, and for lack of a better word, acclimatizing them to what are the real challenges that we are facing, and why is it so important for us to consider sustainability, to consider the use of renewable energy in all of their decision making that they are going to do over the course of the parliament that they have been elected to serve for. Very, very important for them to always factor those particular measures in any decision making that they are going to make. So, for example, if the government of the day decides to go with a particular infrastructure project, let's say a road project going from one side of the island to the next, the parliamentarians have a responsibility not only to question the overall cost of that project, but to ensure that that project is perhaps also climate resilient as well. Okay, that just gives a brief example. But if we now take that into the renewable energy aspect of it, how do you ensure that that project is also energy efficient? What about the road lighting that goes with that particular project? Is it going to be solar powered? Or is it going to still rely on conventional sources of power? And so I think that this workshop in particular really now opens up this arena for decision making for our parliamentarians here in the Caribbean, so they're able to ask the correct questions as they go forward over the course of the parliaments that they've been asked to serve in.